Okay, welcome back, and time for our final interactive panel of the show today on sustainable and responsible business. My guests now are Neil Foster, Chief Sustainability and Risk Officer at Integrate Mining Limited, Clara Kwan, Chief Sustainability Officer at the SMF, the Singapore Manufacturing Federation, and finally Xenia Chang, ESG Lead Consultant and Vice President at Marsh. Hi everyone, how are you?
Good afternoon, good, thank you.
Good afternoon, and in the spirit of sustainability of my back, I've moved on to a bar stool for the rest of the show. I think that's allowed. I think I can be forgiven for that. Unfortunately, it's just a bar stool and there is no actual bar. That's something we could maybe progress to for future events. Anyway, let's start with a definition if we can. Neil, if I could start with you, about what sustainable and responsible business means to you in today's world. I'll start with you on that, Neil.
Well, listen, sustainable and responsible business. You've got to think sustainable from the point of view of intergenerational equity of a company that has financial longevity, but also has and manages its impacts, both its positive impacts, and also and seeks to maximize those in terms of social and economic outcomes, whilst minimizing things like environmental impacts and the like. So it's quite a broad view, but sustainability always has an economic imperative amongst it. If you're not financially sustainable, you have no business. But then secondly, manage those potentially negative impacts and ensure that your positive impacts are greater and land you with that intergenerational equity for future generations.
Thank you, Neil. Clara Kwan, I'll come to you next. Same question.
Right. I think this is about moving beyond the traditional focus on profitability alone. So like Neil said, we do need to consider that a business needs to remain profitable for it to survive. But I think it's for a sustainable and responsible business is not just how much you make, but how you make the money. So we need to consider things that are long-term impacts on society and environment, the various stakeholders, things like ethical governance, and that align with global goals, such as the community, from the government and the business. All of us have our responsibility towards making the world a better place, something that still exists for future generations.
Thank you, Clara. Xenia, I'll come to you last on this one.
Yeah, I would like to bring it back to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So that's where we kind of get the terminology sustainability. So it's this notion that no one should be left behind. Of course, there's different goals that the UN SDG has. So we look at the environment, but also people. So building up communities, as well as looking at biodiversity. So sustainability really is this big umbrella. And what a sustainable and responsible business is a business that is looking at its own contribution to climate change, but also its impact on societies, and also their contribution to ensuring the sustainable development. Another aspect of sustainability is looking to see what are the impacts of climate change on their business. So sustainability is meeting these expectations, so of both internal and external stakeholders. So we hear a lot about value creation. So we see that a lot of companies are looking to ensure that they have, they're creating value for their stakeholders or their shareholders, but also creating value and meeting the needs of their stakeholders. And we see that a lot of opportunities are present when it comes to sustainability. I'm sure we'll be talking about that later on. But a sustainable and responsible business is ensuring that it's doing its part to ensuring the sustainable growth of the global sustainable growth, and also meeting its own shareholder needs and ensuring profit as well.
And this is why I like to start with the definition sometimes, because the same statement has meant the same, only different to all of you from slightly different perspectives. So it's always fascinating to begin there. Clara, if I can come to you with the next question to begin with, and that is on consumer expectations. Because I'd be fascinated to know from all of you how expectations have changed really in your experience, how consumer expectations regarding sustainability and responsibility have evolved. Clara, your thoughts?
consumer expectations actually have evolved quite significantly. I think sustainability has become quite a key evaluation criteria for purchases. So let me cite a study from Deloitte. Actually did a survey on consumers across 23 geographies, and they showed that statistics show that 52% have changed their purchasing behaviors to respond to climate concerns, and 49% actually express support for new regulations. However, then the real question then, how much are they willing to pay more? And if so, how much more? This study done by EY, about 28% are willing to pay more up to a certain extent, up to actually about 15%. Beyond that, then they are a bit on the line on how much they're willing to pay for. But overall, I think that there is a growing demand for transparency in sourcing and production. And also consumers are increasingly favoring brands that align with their values and demonstrate genuine commitment to sustainable practices. So we actually have to kind of, consumers expect this authenticity to it, not just slapping a label that this is sustainable and therefore you should pay more for it and all that. So we must also know that consumers are also becoming more discerning. It's not just everything that has that label eco-friendly, they will fall for it. So we have to be responsible in how we label the products, how the products are made, so that it can demonstrate to the customers and consumers, this is definitely something that's good for their environment. Yeah.
Yes, the devil's always in the detail. They're happy to pay more to a certain extent. That's the key part of that. Zenia, I'll come to you on your thoughts there on consumer expectations.
Yeah, so when we're looking at consumers, I think I can speak to the millennial generation as well as Gen Z. So it's becoming, with their purchasing power, it's almost a hygiene factor or a non-starter when it comes to when they look at products and services. They're willing to pay a premium on more sustainable alternatives. And they're also cognizant of greenwashing as well. So Clara said something about, transparency. So a lot of Gen Z, millennials, or consumers in general, they're really cautious about the claims that a company has. So if a company claims that they look at local suppliers or they ensure there's no human rights violations in their supply chain, they really look into that and they're cognizant about it before they purchase. So I know a lot of my own peers, as well as some of my clients, when they are looking to source or supply, they want to ensure that this is from a sustainable source, and also that they are transparent and they're ensuring that their supply chain is free from any infractions of that sort.
Thank you. Neil Foster, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think coming from the resources sector, we are, right in that supply chain. And if you look at the emerging markets around renewable energy, electric vehicles and the like, the sourcing of critical minerals, such as lithium, rare earth elements and the like, those consumers of those end products included, and those manufacturers, they want to be sure that an expectation is those products are ethically sourced. So yeah, there are no human rights abuses, modern slavery. There's no significant environmental impacts associated with the extraction and processing of those metals that go into those products that support the decarbonisation of the global economy. So for the mining sector, transparency and reporting and transparency of the activities, our emissions, our supply chain, our standards, our policies and procedures is paramount for our investors and also for our consumers and for the end consumer in terms of the person on the street.
Yeah, it's all about responsible transparency there. Let's move on to challenges and some of the barriers that businesses face when they're trying to integrate sustainability and responsibility into everything they do. Zenia, I'll start with you if I can. What do you see as those key challenges? What do you see in here?
Yes, thank you for that question. So I'm actually a little bit different from Neil and Clara. I'm not in-house. I'm actually a third-party consulting and professional service provider. So what I hear from the board and also from my clients, some of the challenges is the investment and also the resources. So not all companies would have the resources to ensure that they have a chief sustainability officer. Some companies do, and that's great. They see the imperative to have that. So some of the challenges business face is having the resources. And if they do have the resources, is the buy-in. So some of my clients, they're part of the sustainability office, but they may not have the capital within the organization to affect change. So it's really convincing executives and boards that this is what you need to do to ensure sustainability and also ensure profitability as well. So so that's kind of my perspective coming in as a advisor and consultant.
And that's always the benefit of having someone from your kind of background on these kind of panels, because you work with such a broad scope of partners and clients, because you get a real overview of what's going on. Neil Foster, I'll come to you on that, on the challenges and the barriers there of integrating sustainability and responsibility. What do you see in here?
I think the biggest mistake that becomes a barrier in organizations and companies is sustainability is seen as a separate function or entity within a company. I think the maturing of it as a field has seen it become more integrated into how a company operates wholesale. So it is something that is, the remit of the chief financial officer, as well as the chief technical officer, as well as the head of people, and truly integrating sustainability across the organization. So the barriers are when you haven't got that, and it's seen as a reporting function, as opposed to a business decision and a risk and opportunity management function that should, and a culture that needs to manifest across the whole organization. So I see it less in terms of barriers. I think people are realizing it makes good business sense, manage these risks, realize the opportunities and the changing economies. And the barriers are really where you haven't got that culture within an organization, or the maturity is not that yet there rather. And that's often in the less mature and rapidly growing companies.
And that is something I find fascinating. It can be easy to forget when we hear often from larger enterprises who all have a chief sustainability officer. It's fully integrated. As you go further down the chain and through the levels, then it's less and less prevalent. So no, thank you for bringing that up. Clara, I'll come to you last on that, on the barriers and challenges.
Well, actually, my role is actually quite interesting. So as a CSO for the Singapore Marine Federation, I actually help our members to embark on their sustainability journey. So it's a cross between Zina and Neil, actually. So where I consult in, where I assist members is how do they do it. Very often is the small and medium enterprises that need a lot of this help. So actually under our flagship product, which is CSS as a service, we actually rent ourselves out, as you can imagine, on how we can help deal with the issues that SMEs face in starting their journey. So one of the things, aside from what Zina said about cost, is definitely a concern. Actually, one of them is they're actually very confused. There's so many different types of sustainability reporting. Many consultants have their own solutions, and what kind of reporting counts? What is good carbon tracking? What is this scope 1, 2, and 3? And how does it in the end relate to my business? Because a lot of them just feel like this feels kind of far away. It's maybe only the big companies that really need to be punished for, either for carbon tax or something that I don't know my scope 3. I don't even know my scope 1 and 2. But my suppliers are not even gonna respond to my request on their costs and things like that. So they have difficulties in that area. The other one actually is a bit of a mindset kind of a change that they need to have. So many of them feel that, like what Neil said, is not a standalone. Many of them feel that I just need to assign a junior officer, go collect all the data and then submit to whoever that wants it. That's good enough, but do not disturb how I run business as usual. And that is not what sustainability is. You need to embed into their business DNA. So very often it's about changing the mindset of the bosses, of the senior management. And once we have the buy-in, we have to make sure that the middle and everyone down the company believes in it and not just doing because the boss says so. So that needs certain alignment, and that takes time. So education and training actually is very useful in that area.
Well, Clara, I'm going to put you on the spot briefly for a second before I move on to the next question, because I'd love to put myself in that boardroom, in that meeting with you or one of your colleagues, when you are trying to convince someone who doesn't quite understand the importance of it and the value of making it integral to the business, watermarked through the business. How do you turn that doubter into someone who really acknowledges it needs to be in there? Put me in that meeting. How do you go about that?
So usually when we start with, so when we ask to see the board and present something to them, right, we definitely want to have a certain business case or what is the ROI behind it. So very often when we see either through from other competitors that have already started, sustainability now it's not that new as it was 10, 20 years ago where you cannot find success cases. So in every industry, there will be some shining example of a leader. Like, do you want to be in that direction? And very often we are able to show ROI in quite a few of these instances. So where do you want to be? And very often when we are asked to be in a boardroom, they are already in a state that their businesses are starting to plateau. Usually not so much when they are doing really, really well and should we consider sustainability. It's more like they seem to be slowing down or coming down in a curve. What is going on? You know, are we doing something wrong and all that? So sustainability comes out as, could it be that innovative solution that they can use to, you know, re-inject life back into their company? So all these things will get them excited about it. If not, it'll be real solutions like trying out solar and things like that. And shall we then measure whether does it bring into things like cost efficiency, operations efficiency and all that. So it's not really using the word sustainability and ramming it through the throats of the board and say, do sustainability, save the world and all that. It's not, but actually sustainability is called many other things before this became a trend, right? So it's really tapping on what does it really translate in businesses? And very often we find that these things have been around for a long time. We're just calling it a different name now, called sustainability.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking us behind that locked door, if you will. I love the expression of injecting new life into the business. Really, really nice way to phrase that. Right, let's move on to the question of balance, because time and again this does come up when you're balancing short-term profitability, and there's always pressure for that, with long-term sustainable practice. How do you get that balance? Neil Foster, I'll start with you. There's always the pressure for short-term profitability. How do you get that balance right between the two competing factors? Or, frankly, is it an outdated question now? Your thoughts?
No, I think every company will need to set its own pace on the sustainability journey, one that ensures it's maintaining its economic viability and profitability in the short term, but also secures the long-term future. And I don't think there's one set pace that should suit every type of company or every type of industry. It's going to vary. The job of the Chief Sustainability Officer and working with the management team is to establish what is that pace. You've got to crunch the numbers. You've got to look at the economics. You can't bury yourself in cost to move fast on sustainability and then you're out of business. So you've got to really balance it, but also you've got to have a business that can be agile enough to change the pace when it sees the movement of the market or the risks changing as well, to maintain profitability on medium and long term. So the economics is always in the equation on sustainability. It's not a compliance only measure. You've got to go beyond compliance, but you can't bury yourself in costs. So I enjoy that. It's where you've got to use your grey matter to really set a really clear pathway.
Thank you. Clara, your thoughts?
I think for me, how we actually encourage sustainability, it's really about what they want to do to make a difference, right? Like, are they going down the same old pathway, doing the same old tired method? Or when you talk about balance, what are our, actually, I think one of the important things in sustainability is that materiality assessment, where what is important to them and how are they going to further these goals. But when you try and balance it between short-term and long-term, they are then able to see, especially when they map out their 1-year plan, 3-year plan, 5-year plan, that's where the balance comes in, right? Like, what are we foregoing now to see that future value? And it's not just for sustainability. You do it for every part of the business, right? So we shouldn't take sustainability as like a separate product or animal completely from the business. It's all part and parcel of it, and it should not be treated like an alien just because it's a longer word.
Thank you. If I can go to you next on that, Zenia.
Yeah, so your question on balancing both profitability and long-term sustainable practice. So I, as a consultant, I have the privilege to come to the board or to executives or management with data. So they look at the data to drive their decisions. And what I'm able to provide as a service is looking at the financial impact of climate change onto their balance sheet and their cash flows. And that usually perks up the ears of management because if they hear that a market risk, so it could be investor market or the consumer market risk that we talked about earlier, consumer changing expectations, or maybe from financiers. Financiers could have their own ESG goals or own net zero investment goals. So if they're looking to unlock capital, if they're not able to borrow from the capital markets, that's going to be a risk that they want to have some view on and to mitigate that risk. Another would be a policy risk. So if they are hit by a carbon tax, we're able to show that in different scenarios. So whether that's a 1.5 degree world or business as usual, we'll show them how a carbon tax could hit their P&L. Or maybe their tax liability will cost a lot. So that will eat into the profits. So this is not an outdated question, but coming in as a consultant, I do get to show them this data so they can make choices and drive decisions based on this data.
It's amazing how much understanding risk can make certain ears prick up further up the management chain. Thank you for that, Zhenya. Let's look at the global context a little bit here, because I'm sure there's many kinds of challenges in putting these kind of strategies in place in regions that may not have such evolved sustainability backgrounds, such mature sustainability backgrounds. You know, for example, a policy that might work in the US or EU or Africa or in any different region might not work in other regions. I'll start with you if I can on this, Clara. What's your advice there when it comes to making sure a sustainability or responsibility strategy works in a particular geographical region?
So here, I think one of the things that we should not ignore would be the regulatory side. Because one thing is that we should be doing things that at least that fulfills the regulatory requirements, if there are any. If there isn't, then we obviously look towards the global trend. But in the sense of where a company is located, where is their business going to export? Or is it like domestic, right? So that's where they have to meet the standards of these. This is very important because while we say that we want to do better than the rest, or we're going to do the minimum, if we don't meet the requirements that the laws in that country requires, they are violating laws. And we don't want anyone to be suffering a penalty, right? So that's the minimum. But then in terms of each country, what for every different jurisdiction there is, right? How are they going to fulfill it, right? Very often for smaller businesses, a lot of our neighboring countries do not have, a lot of them are guidelines. So very often it comes to their customer requirements. And then this is where I hear a whole variety of people are concerned about, say, the EU requirements, what is the US one, or maybe Asia Pacific, are there like, what is it required in Malaysia or Hong Kong, in China? So all these things, actually, the company is very sensitive to what the customer needs. So on understanding that, that's where they can find a balance on what suits them. So that's why there's no one ESG sustainability strategy that's a one size fits all. It goes into what the company is market that they are targeting towards.
Absolutely, it is not one size fits all, as easy as that would be. Zhenya, your thoughts on that from a consultation point of view?
Yes, so I work with companies across Asia. So I kind of see the different levels of maturity when it comes to looking at sustainability and also regulations. So we see, I would say, the exemplar here in Singapore, a lot of the pressure is coming top down from the national governments. So Singapore has an aggressive net zero goal by mid-century. So the whole economy needs to decarbonize. So there's a carbon tax on heavy emitters, but they are also helping small and medium enterprises in providing resources for the low carbon transition. So we see a lot of that from Clara and her organization. So they're working with SMEs around that. But some other countries, they have their own goals per the Paris Trade Agreements. So their own nationally determined contribution may be conditional. So they have conditional targets depending on the help of first or more technically advanced countries. So for like the Philippines, for example, they do have reduction emission targets, but without that help from other sectors, more developed nations and more investment in the technology, they're not going to be able to meet that. And other countries in the region have more emphasis on the S in ESG. So Indonesia and India, they actually have laws regarding social impact and investing in the community. But we see that changing. So now they are also investing in in areas in the community where there could be some environmental justice, or working with local communities and indigenous peoples to ensure that they're not left behind when it comes to sustainability.
Thank you for that perspective. Zenia, Neil Foster, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the mining sector is a truly global sector, and it's working across continents with very different levels of economic and social standards. The risks to a company are going to vary depending on those jurisdictions, and therefore what the priorities are within those different regions will differ even for a single global organization. So it may well be social uplift of people out of poverty in, perhaps if you've got a mining operation in Africa, it may be disease prevention in terms of typhoid, AIDS and the like, in terms of having that positive impact. Whereas in more developed countries, it may well be a focus around carbon emissions reduction and hitting net zero, because you've actually got availability to key infrastructure that can enable technologies to be deployed that aren't necessarily in the deepest realms of areas such as Africa or other developing nations. So it's going to vary depending on the circumstance and location. The ultimate aim is consistent across any global company, but the reality is what you can be most impactful on in the short and medium term is going to differ.
Absolutely. Let's move on to some examples now, because I've got such a broad scope of experience across this panel. It'd be wrong of me not to dig into some examples. And some of the best ones you've seen to make operations more sustainable and responsible. Zenia, I'll start with you if I can on this one. Any examples you want to pick from? I'm sure from a consultation point of view, you could fill the rest of the show with the examples you've seen and heard, but I'll leave you to pick one.
Yeah, so I talked a little bit more about countries that may not be so mature in terms of sustainability. So I do have this one client that is looking to bring access to mobile data to the rural areas and to connect everyone to the internet. So they're looking to build these telco towers in rural areas, and they may not be connected to the grid. So they have to use diesel generators, which are very heavy emitters. And so there's actually an opportunity for them to look at using the area where they're building these telco towers as a way to build up solar panels. So their telco tower does not need to use diesel gensets anymore. So they see this problem and they're coming up with an opportunity or a solution from this climate opportunity. So that's a really great example where they're ensuring that they're able to ensure that these rural communities are able to access the internet and mobile data, and they're doing it in a sustainable way.
What a great example. Thank you, Zenia. Neil, your thoughts?
Yeah, probably a couple of examples. I had the good fortune of working in the Philippines on a major infrastructure project in Manila Bay. And there they are partnering with local communities in delivering a biodiversity offset program of a huge scale in the generation of intertidal wetlands and mudflats for a number of critically endangered species, and also reduce flood risk for populations who are living on the fringe of the bay, who generally are inundated during storm events and the like. It's a first of its kind for that country. It's a demonstration of how major infrastructure, in this case an international airport, can be successfully delivered with positive outcomes involving the local communities. And it's actually enabling those who are involved in the project to see how they can do that on future projects, access finance from a broader base for capital, given the responsible nature of the development. And that's real substantial progress, both for the company, but also for the communities who see infrastructure and development as a positive outcome for them. More locally in Australia, there's a key emphasis on delivering social outcomes for Indigenous populations. And that's done through, in our case, in De Grey, partnering with Indigenous-owned companies to deliver works for us, supporting them through a growth cycle so they can self-determine their own future economically, and getting a mutual benefit out of a mine in their country and on their land.
Two wonderful examples. Thank you, Neil. And Clara, I'll come to you last on this. Within the Singapore Manufacturing Federation, you must work with an extraordinary number of different organisations. So you must also have an extraordinary number of examples, but I'll give you the floor to suggest one or two.
One example, I just want maybe to show how simple their initial goal was. So there's a food manufacturing and retailer here in Singapore. And so they have several retail outlets around, and they wanted to embark on their sustainability journey. Right? They also found it a little bit overwhelming. So they were like wondering what to do. So they was like, okay, maybe one of the easiest thing could be they were looking at water, or should they, and so they decided on energy. So they said, maybe let's just see if we could optimize the operation. So it's not really the word sustainability, but how can we optimize their operations? And maybe from the energy, from looking at the energy side of things. And they were like, what should we do? We are all spread out everywhere. We are very, very new into this. We don't know what to do. And they decided to tap into IoT technology to first collect data from every stage of their production and operations to first understand their energy consumption hotspots and opportunities for improvement. So with that data collected, they actually managed to hit a maximum reduction of 30% in energy consumption last year, throughout all the factory and retail outlets. So it was quite a logistic, quite a big project. And they were just really happy that they started. I think the lesson learned was they wanted to do something, just found it a little bit overwhelming initially and just decided to start with small steps.
Thank you. Another fine example. And that's one of the things I love about sometimes the smaller examples can be just as exciting because they're very real and you can really see the tangible change that's being made. Time is rapidly running away from us, so I do want to push on to looking to the future really and where we see evolution within the role of corporate sustainability evolving in the next 5 to 10 years. Neil Foster, I'll start with you if I can on this. Get your crystal ball out. Where do you see things happening over the next 5 to 10 years?
I think we have some headwinds currently. There's been some geopolitical shifts that are a real challenge to sustainability. I don't think it will have a long-lasting effect, and most organisations realise the commercial imperative of sustainability in their organisation. But that is going to change maybe the pace for some organisations. Other than that, things are accelerating faster and faster. This is, I think Clara mentioned her clients have so many things coming at them. It's only going to continue to do so and do so more. And in doing that, I think it's going to be difficult for people working in sustainability to keep pace. Having the resources, having the knowledge, on a broader basis across a company is going to be massively important. We've seen the climate change imperative come. Biodiversity is the next one. We see that one coming. What comes after that? There is just risk after risk after risk that is approaching a company that has to be managed. So it's exciting because it's constantly changing, but it's always going to be a challenge.
Thank you, Clara. I'll come to you next on this one.
I mean, putting aside politics, as what Neil was mentioning, I think from a company perspective, I think it will move from more fragmented initiatives, like they are trying to see where their gaps are at the moment for each at a company level for their own, and more, I think they're coming together to embed sustainability into their core strategies, and then to scale to high impact solutions like circular economy, decarbonization. I think there's going to be greater and greater realization that one company can only do so much. Then maybe they will move towards the industry, and all that. So it becomes more and more of a collective effort. When it comes to reporting, we see a bit of adjustments. So I think it's no longer about reporting for the sake of reporting, but what is its impact? What are the real solutions that should come up from sustainability? So technology will definitely enable better tracking of results of emissions, resource use, and transparency. And also, as what Neil said, nature-based solutions. And all of them, I think, we're all going to start working more closely together rather than in the different little segments that we're focusing on right now. So this is the next 5 to 10 years, bit of a runway that we have, but not forgetting our 2030 goals.
Thank you. Xenia.
Yes, so what I see the role of corporate sustainability. So as a consultant, what I see is it's great that companies are having their own sustainability offices. But as we heard from Clara, there has to be a behavior change within the organization. So what I could see is a lot of companies looking to consultants for the more technical aspects. So more of the modeling, looking at climate change risk. So if that's physical risk, looking at physical risk models, instead of bringing that in-house, they're outsourcing that. and also maybe outsourcing reporting so they can focus on the whole of organization behavior change and looking at sustainability within. So bringing up their scope of work of reporting or doing some of the modeling for disclosure's sake so that they can focus their resources within the organization.
Thank you, Xenia. And I'm going to quickly go to one very quick question from the audience here. This one's from Neha. This is the one that's been upvoted most. So I'm going to be very democratic and diplomatic and pick the one that's been upvoted the most. And that's about the challenges you face in implementing sustainable business practices and how you overcome them. I'll rephrase that slightly in terms of advice about what advice you would give for anyone who's struggling to implement sustainable practices within an organisation. Clara, I'll start with you on that. Your thoughts. What advice would you give anyone struggling to implement sustainable and responsible practices within a business?
So actually, there are many different reasons why one could be struggling. Most of them are actually struggling. But I think one very important thing that we need to remember is that sustainability is actually a journey. It's not a quick, it's not about throwing a lot of money in this year and getting everything done. It's not possible. And it's also not what we are trying to achieve. We want to achieve a step-by-step improvement. So as you think about it as a journey, then you ask yourself, I think it depends on whether you are a big MNC or a small company. So when you are big, you can maybe say that let's start small, maybe on a certain department, on a certain product, and start innovate and embed sustainability in those areas without affecting most of your businesses. You can start doing that. But as an SME, I think any small change will affect you a lot. Then it comes to where is the problem is very often a mindset change in terms of like the capability on its staff to be able to scale sustainability into its business. So then very often we're talking about training, we're talking about needing that hand holding, either getting an external consultant or bringing these people for training and development. We should not forget the importance of that because you cannot just simply say that this is this concept, we got to change this particular product into sustainability, go do it. But if your people lack that know-how, it's just going to be very superficial, or it's just going to fall flat in your face. So overall, we need to be patient. We need to, sustainability, you see the benefits long-term. It's not something that you see immediately, but your small little wins will actually motivate you to do more. So don't be so ambitious to try to change your whole company. Sometimes I would advise the 20-80 rule, the smallest steps for the biggest impact. And that's where you can motivate yourself to do more step by step.
All right, thank you. Xenia, your advice on this?
Yeah, kind of building on what Clara said, what's helpful for me as a consultant going to different companies is actually showing everything on a matrix. So we provide a roadmap. And like she said, there can be things that are low-hanging fruits or more of a short-term opportunity that requires less investment. So that can be energy efficiency projects. So focusing, again, on those small wins, but then also keeping in view the long-term opportunity. So maybe there's this notion that the business model should change so that they can ensure that's they're part of the low carbon transition. But that's more of a longer term and more investment view. So that can always be a goal, but showing all of the sustainability initiatives on a roadmap or a matrix that shows short-term opportunities with lower investments versus longer-term opportunities with higher investments can really help a company kind of demystify what they should do in terms of sustainability.
Xenia, thank you. And Neil Foster, I'll give you the last word on this.
To build on Xenia's feedback, really, it's communicate, collaborate. So get your business, get your organization, get your supporters, get everybody across it, and persist. It does take time. And you will not be thanked necessarily immediately, but you will be thanked longer term. Your organization will mature and understand the benefits of the work that you and your colleagues do, or your consultants do. So, and enjoy it. It's an exciting field to be in, to be so impactful, and also deliver economic outcomes. So it's exciting, and most people actually want to get on board and support any initiatives in this space.
Neil, thank you very much indeed. I thought you were just going to say communicate and collaborate. It would have been a wonderful mic drop answer to close on things. One of these days, someone's going to do that to me and catch me completely on the hop. Apologies to everyone who's been sending questions in. There were things we didn't get to on management buy-in. I guess we sort of covered that. Pursuing sustainable and responsible business, about risk, getting stakeholder buy-in, spending on energy. There were so many questions we couldn't get to, so apologies for that. We are right out of time. But Neil, Clara, Xenia, thank you so much for joining us here at Sustainability Live Singapore. Really enjoyed your company this afternoon.
It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Pleasure was all mine. Thank you very much indeed.